15 of the 16 of us have a group chat.
Okay.
Uh, and by the end of the season, you'll probably know the one that's not in our group chat. But I have a lot of respect for John Kavanaugh, not so much Conor McGregor, but John Kavanaugh. So I'm sure I would have found success over there and learned a lot over there as well.
Chandler was almost meant to be your coach on that show.
Yeah, that our connection through adoption, I think, helped kind of spark our relationship and developing it.
It's funny because seeing you on TV makes me feel like I'm talking to like a celebrity right now instead of a fighter. But what's that been like, man? Seeing yourself on TV every week, how's the experience? Is it like a weird feeling? To me, it'd be like a little weird.
Yeah, it's weird because last time I was in the UFC was 2014, 2015, and
Yeah,
like social media was around, but it was like you had a Facebook to talk to like your aunt from out of state. It wasn't like
yeah,
it
yeah.
is now. So getting all the messages and all the people that are hitting me up on that thing, I'm like, it's a little bit different. And my wife's the one who's like, look at you got more followers or whatever, and I'm like, I don't care. Like at the end of the day, like I'm gonna make my money fighting and
Yeah,
getting bonuses. So like I don't know. It's cool, I guess. It's different though for sure.
absolutely. And it's funny because I poke fun, but you are a fighter nonetheless, right? All that stuff does not interest you, right? You're a fighter, you're a warrior. That's what you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like talking about fights with people. Like I like doing podcasts and just shooting the shit and talking about fights
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But I'm a huge fight fan. But yeah, I'm not the Sean O'Malley type, really.
Right. Absolutely. Look, man, obviously you finished wrapping a show like that. I would imagine seeing your family for the first time, that had to have been special when it was all done, right? I mean, you seem very much like the family man from what I've seen on the show, from what I've seen on online and everything. Is that accurate? Was it special to sort of reunite with them after the 6 weeks of no phone, no connection, you know?
Yeah, I knew that was going to be the hardest part for me going into it, was
Right.
just not being able to talk to him. And my wife actually had surgery while I was gone. And I mean, it wasn't like life threatening surgery. It was
Oh, good.
removing
Okay.
a skin cancer. So it was like dermatology type stuff, but she
Okay.
still had to like get cut up, and like, so that was, luckily the producers were able to tell me like what was up,
Mhm.
like that she was okay and everything. So that was cool. But yeah,
Good.
it was the hardest part for me. It's just not. And I got a three. My youngest is 3, so like every few weeks, like she
Yeah.
transitions into a new phase, And so when I was gone for 6 weeks and then I came back, like I noticed that she wasn't the same anymore. And that was kind of sad. And like she's changed. Her vocabulary is more extensive. She's like little things that you don't notice when you're there every day, and then if you're not there for a long period of time, you
Yes.
learn. That was
100%.
tough.
Yeah, man, the little humans, they evolve by the day, it seems like, right? But I'm glad to see your wife's doing well. I'm glad to see the family's good, man. And besides that, what have you been up to these days? Usual stuff, training. It seems like you're in the daily routine, right?
Yeah, I came back from the show, and I was coaching a junior high wrestling team at the school I work at, and
Mhm.
so we went right into, literally I got back at the end of the week, like a Thursday, Friday. I think I had a delayed flight, so I got in like Saturday, and then that Monday we started wrestling practice. So I was busy for about 2.5 months just coaching these kids and all that stuff. And so that's ended, and now I'm just kind of back to full-time training.
Obviously, the elephant in the room, the ultimate fighter. That's a lot of stuff a lot of people want to hear about. I just want to reiterate, if it did not happen in episodes 1 or 2, guys, we obviously are not going to talk about it. I don't want to give any spoilers for what's ahead. But I do want to rewind for a second, Cody, right? You walk in, my episode 1, Michael Chandler gets the 135 vets, 155 vets, right? First thing I thought was, for the vets who are trying to get into the UFC now, right? You're getting coached by a guy who took quite a long route to get to the UFC himself. Of course, he was good at Bellator, right? But a guy who was successful, who went through a whole journey and then got to the UFC. Do you feel like Chandler was a perfect coach for the vets?
Yeah, for sure. Because a lot of the vets were just like no nonsense kind of guys. Like we're here to clock in, put our heads down, get to work, train hard.
Yeah.
We've been here, we've done this, so like a lot of the glitz and the glamour of the whole experience like doesn't phase us, and we know isn't really what's important. So um, for us, it was, I think, a perfect match just with our mentality and Chandler's mentality. He has a company called Walk On, um, which is based on the story of how he walked onto the Mizzou wrestling team without a scholarship and then ended up becoming an All-American. And so I feel like our whole team kind of embodied that phrase and that mentality of like that walk-on mentality. So it was a good fit for the veterans for sure.
Yeah, and as a guy who was in the UFC already, man, like, did it come to you as a surprise when you were invited onto the show, or did you know, you've been picking up wins, right? You're like, what, 7-1, 7-2 in the last 10 or so fights? Like, did you know it was a possibility that the UFC could be contacting you? Did it come out of left field? Like, what was it?
It kind of came out of left field because I just didn't know if I was on the UFC's radar anymore because of my age. And I was like, I don't know, if you watch the Contender Series every summer, they've all got 22-year-olds with 6-0 records, and so I was like, that's probably not going to happen. I don't see a whole lot of veterans fighting on that thing. So I didn't really know if I was really, not. I fought for Eagle FC when Khabib started that up, and then when that kind of came crashing down, I was able to get out of that contract and find a quick fight in LA for a title. And then after that, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was kind of tired of fighting on the regional scene. I've been doing it for so long, and I feel like
Yeah.
I've earned my spot somewhere. But I wasn't getting a whole lot from Bellator, and PFL they haven't had bantamweights yet. Haven't had a season of bantamweights.
Right.
And so I was just kind of in limbo and like, man, I don't really know if this is worth doing anymore. It's the amount of training you do, and for regional pay is doesn't make any sense. You're only doing it because you're hoping that regional fight leads to something. And so yeah, it was just kind of. But once I found out they were doing bantamweights and they reached out to me to interview me for it, I thought I was pretty confident I would get on the show just because I can't think of too many other bantamweights outside the UFC who have the resume I do. And so I was confident once I found out they were doing a bantamweight veteran season. Like, I was like, well, I should be on that. And then they originally told me I didn't make it on it. So I was super bummed.
Oh, yeah?
And yeah, originally I interviewed with them, and then they came back and were like, hey, we didn't choose you. And I was like, really? Are you serious? And then like a week after that, they're like, hey, never mind, we're choosing you. And so that was that.
Good, man. So I'm sure it was surprising, but also exciting news, right?
Yeah, it was just, I think it's perfect for me. I've always kind of got in the sport to test myself, and I want to see where I stack up with the best guys, and wherever I land, I just want to be able to end my career and say, like, this is how far I got, this is how good I was, wherever that is, and so this gives me an opportunity to do just that.
Absolutely. Not to divulge, just real quick, do you know whatever happened to Eagle FC? Because I have no idea. They sort of just disappeared. I guess they're just not a thing anymore.
For me, in my experience, so they had a show last January, was their first US show. It was in Miami, and I fought on that card.
Right.
And then I signed a 4-fight deal with them after that. And then they told me, okay, you're going to fight in March. And I was supposed to fight Ricky Bandejas. And
Wow.
Then as we got closer to March, I started reaching out like, hey, I haven't got a contract yet. What's going on? What's the date, the actual date? And then they're like, oh, we're going to have you fight in June. So then, okay, well, I'm going to reset here and start over. And then June starts coming around, and then, hey, we're going to have you fight in August. And it just was like they kept moving the goal line,
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with the war, the Russian-Ukrainian war, because once that really started getting underway, Eagle FC hasn't really done any shows in the United States. Most of their staff was Russian or Dagestani. And I know, meeting Timur on the show, Dagestani, there is a distinction between the two. The Dagestanis have been fighting the Russians for 50 years for their independence, so they're not the same thing. Timur was very adamant about that, so I learned something, But yeah, it was a lot of Dagestanis, which are a part of Russia, so I'm assuming they have a hard time getting into the country and stuff like that, if I had to guess,
Yeah, I guess I just learned something too then. Now, look, back to the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, you did bring up Timur, so I guess it's sort of a good transition into that. You walk into the first practice, episode 1, right? And you got Chandler's coaches, right? You got Ryan Bader, you got the TUF winner himself, right? He's been on the show before. You got Robert Drysdale, you got Jason Stroud. That's a strong list of names, man. What were the first impressions working with those coaches in those early stages of what we saw?
I was just trying to, pick their brains. Robert Drysdale was our jiu-jitsu guy and world champion, and just a guy who's been around the sport of MMA
Super
for a long
smart
time.
guy. Yeah.
He just has an awesome, like, his mind for the game. And so many times we go to jiu-jitsu gyms and we train with jiu-jitsu practitioners that are really good at jiu-jitsu, but they don't have any experience of how to transition that into mixed martial arts.
Mm.
Like when you start punching and elbowing people, it changes the whole game, And so um, Drysdale knows that. And so he's able to teach us things that are going to work for mixed martial arts and not just at a IBJJF tournament or something. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was really great to learn from him. And then Coach Strout, man, that guy's his energy in the room is just it's contagious. He just loves the sport. He's one of those guys who's super passionate about kickboxing. And I mean, he would be at practice. Usually, when we would show up to practice, we would walk into the apex, and Strout would be on the bags in a sweatsuit, and he's been hitting the bag for an hour, and then
Wow.
he's about to coach and hit and hold like mitts for 25 rounds for us. Like the guy was just a machine, and he just was always like keeping things light and goofy and having fun. And man, it was really the coaching staff. Ryan Bader was awesome. Ryan was so good about moving around with. I mean, we were all 55 pounders and 35 pounders, and he's obviously a heavyweight now,
He's a big boy.
in
Yeah.
Bellator. But he could move around with you, and I mean, he's not like throwing all his weight on you, but he's still quick and he can move. And I rolled with him and sparred with him more than just about anybody else. So, yeah, overall, man, all of our coaches, I think, went above and beyond for us. And I didn't really have a lot of expectations going in. But, in retrospect, and by the time it all came to a conclusion, I was super grateful for the amount of energy and time and effort that they put into us. And yeah, I think we were lucky to be on Team Red.
Interesting what you just said. Like you didn't expect that. And I actually wanted to ask you that next because you said you didn't feel like you were going to be a part of a team sort of when you were going into the house. I saw in one of the interviews you said that, right? Chandler and company, they were able to build a pretty good team, it looked like, right? Were you expecting coming into the house as far as unity in teams? Did you just not think that was going to be a thing? And it had to have been a pleasant surprise, right? When you learned that, that, hey, this is a team, he cares about us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always watch The Ultimate Fighter, and I saw the dudes like sitting in the bleachers or on the little stage they have you stand at when somebody's fighting, and
Yeah.
they're always like cheering each other on, like they've known each other for a decade. And I've always thought that was goofy. Like, what how are they rooting for someone they've met 4 weeks ago? Like, who really? I don't really care. That's how that would be like more or less probably my
Yeah.
mentality. But then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get in the house and you start living with these guys and going through the trenches with them and experiencing this whole thing with them. And it's pretty crazy how quickly you kind of form a bond with each other and you have that kind of team atmosphere. And the coaches did a really good job of kind of creating that environment for us. And yeah, even though some of us were, you're always a little bit on guard because you could be fighting guys that you're training with down the road in the semifinals or whatever. But we were really we felt like a team, like a unit, and yeah, it was kind of crazy how fast that transition can happen. But I think about it like any team, or like you think about like the military. Anytime you like a group of men or women that go through the trenches together, go through hard things together.
Right.
You form a bond. I try to do that when I coach wrestling all the time too. Like I train the kids hard and I make them believe that they're training hard, and that helps create kind of that environment and that bond between them.
Yeah, man, it's interesting because obviously it didn't seem like it was something you expected going into it, but then after the show, it was almost something you had to experience. It was something you almost had to experience to understand for yourself, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I didn't anticipate it, so it was definitely there were a lot of things I didn't anticipate about the show. So
Definitely, man. Especially with Connor there, I'm sure he threw a bunch of shit into a whirlwind, right?
yeah, a lot of us would joke that it was the Conor McGregor show more than it was the Ultimate Fighter in a lot of ways, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, man. That's right. Listen, looking ahead, right? I think it was like episode 2. You get matched up with well, no, you got matched up with Mondo or Leon, but episode 2 comes time for that fight, right? He was Connor's number 1 bantamweight going into it. It seemed like there was some high expectations early on. Like it said, Dana was saying, "Oh, I think this guy can make a run towards it all." You face a guy like that. Are you looking to make a statement? Like, are those things you're thinking about before you fight him?
I mean, at the end of the day, like the best fighter is going to win the show, you know? So whether you have to fight them in the first round or the finals or the semifinals, it doesn't really matter how the cookie crumbles. If you're the best guy in the house, then you're going to prove it, you know? So I wasn't really like, I was down to fight them all, down to fight any of them.
Mhm.
Um, and Mondo was definitely one of the ones that of the prospect side that I had circled, you know, like I watched his fights and I saw where he was dangerous. I saw where he was deficient. Um, and so yeah, he was definitely, you know, he was a guy that you had to watch out for. He had a really good squeeze on his chokes, his front chokes. Um, and he had, you know, he's an athletic, explosive guy, not bad hands either. So all in all, I knew I had a tough match in front of me for sure.
After the fight, as opposed to before the fight, you get a win against a guy like that, right? A tough guy. Does it give you any more confidence, or do you already have all the confidence you need? Because maybe you already do. I mean, you're in there for a reason.
No, I think it helps build momentum and kind of get yourself settled into the
Momentum,
competition.
yeah,
You know, like you feel like, all right, now the ball is rolling in this direction. I just got to keep it moving in this direction. And I just the whole show, man. You know, a lot of us were writing journal entries and stuff every day because we didn't have a whole lot else to do. That kind of saved our mental health side of things, I think.
sure.
Um, but one of the things I would always be writing was like, and reminding myself of is control what you can control. Um, the rest, let it just roll off your shoulders because you can't control it, you know, and focus on the little things you have to do each day, every morning, every practice, from the training to the recovery to when you're going to bed to when you're getting up to all those little minute things that you can control to put yourself in the best position you can put yourself in. And so that was my mentality every day. Every decision I made was based around, is this going to put me in a better position for the next thing, you know? And so that's just kind of where I kept my focus, no matter how much craziness was going on around me. I kept reminding myself, just control what you control, let the rest kind of roll off because you can't control that. And as you're going to see as the show unfolds, some of the stuff that happens like was out of my control. Um, but again, I just kept that mentality, and I think that served me well, you know, throughout the show.
Yeah, and you brought up the journaling, right? I think I don't know if it was episode 1 or 2, but we saw you sort of journaling on the couch. Is that something you did strictly in the house? Is that something you do as well, you know, when you're not there?
I was really big into journalism when I was younger. I was like an editor for my high school paper, and then I wrote for my college paper. So I loved writing and just journaling in general, or writing on news articles or opinion articles or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'd really kind of stopped doing it. You know, you get busy with life. You got a job,
Okay.
you got kids, and I hadn't been writing consistently, at least in a long time. And so kind of getting myself back into that. And then since I've been home, I've just kept doing it because I think it's good for me, you know. So it's something that I picked back up while I was in the house that I'm gonna try to take out of there with me, you know.
For sure. You know, obviously hard times can provide some great learning lessons. Do you feel like if you didn't go through that stint in the UFC, through those setbacks, do you feel like you would have been able to, you know, come out and start strong like this and be on a show like this and have the mental fortitude to sort of endure a show like this? Do you feel like you would have been able to handle it had you not had that initial UFC stint?
Well, it's funny because I was almost on the Ultimate Fighter many years ago. I forgot the name of which season it was, but it was the one that Chris Holdsworth won. And
Okay.
I'd made it through all the tryouts in Vegas, and they did all the medicals. They kept us there for a week, and then they sent us home and said, "Okay, the show's going to start." And you know, I can't remember, like 3 or 4 weeks the show was going to start. So we were going to go home, train at home, and then come back for the show. And then
Yeah.
I got a text message that I didn't make it on. I was an alternate and didn't make it. And so I think back to that time and obviously being disappointed when that happened. But I think things happen for a reason. And, you know, I think maybe I wouldn't have been ready to be on in this environment and this show had I, you know, not already kind of, I mean, that was the thing too. Like all the veterans, most of the veterans had been in the UFC in the last like year or two. And for me, it was 8 years. So I feel like if anybody, you know, was met for kind of going through the trenches like this, it was probably me, because I've been battling on the smaller scene and trying to find tough opponents and stuff like that for a long time. So
Yeah.
um, I felt like I was ready for the whole shebang, you know.
Look, before the fight, and this is the thing that I was kind of looking forward to asking you most because I feel like it sort of resonated a lot. Before your fight, you share an awesome moment with Michael Chandler, right? It had to have made you even more comfortable with having him as a coach, right? When I saw that, I thought, man, I don't think the guy could have picked a better coach. Like, as far as fit, Chandler was almost meant to be your coach on that show.
Yeah, that our connection through adoption, I think, helped kind of spark our relationship and developing it. That conversation that we had on the show was like really early on in the season. It was like probably our second or third practice, and then just kind of building off that, as we went through it. But yeah, like I said, like
That was an
when I got
awesome
on the
moment.
show, when I got on the show, I didn't care. I didn't care which side I landed on. I was like, I don't care. I'm here to win. I'm here to fight.
Mhm.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, and I have a lot of respect for John Kavanaugh, not so much Conor McGregor, but John Kavanaugh. So I'm sure I would have found success over there and learned a lot over there as well. But yeah, in retrospect, knowing what I know now, I'm really really stoked where I landed and the relationships I was able to build. I train out here at the pit in San Luis Obispo, and we've got a good little team. But we don't have like a ton of people in the UFC. We got a lot of amateurs. We got a few pros that have had a few pro fights so far and are coming up and young.
Mhm.
But we don't have like a plethora of like 20. We're not American top team. So I'm
Sure.
not around uh, guys that are in the UFC all the time. And so, being around and getting to meet so many people and make so many connections, I think, for me that helps build confidence. Like when you're training with people and you're like, you know what, I think I could hang with all these dudes. You know what, I think I could beat all these dudes. You know what I mean? Like, so it definitely helped me just being in that environment and that kind of Shark Tank for 6 weeks.
There's 16 good guys that get on that show for a reason, right? Have you been able to sort of keep into you don't have to say the name of the specific guy, but you've been able to sort of keep in contact with any of these guys and say, hey, maybe, if I'm by you someday, we could train.
Yeah, we started. We have a group chat.
Oh,
Well,
really?
15 of the 16 of us have a group chat.
Okay.
Uh, and by the end of the season, you'll probably know the one that's not in our group chat. But
I like the teaser. Okay.
15 of us are in a group chat, and we talk all the time. I'm actually planning on training with one of the guys. I'll leave his name out, but I'm going to
Sure.
be going to his gym out of state this summer to go train with him. So, and then that just meet like so many people from all over the place. Like Timur is a Dagestani, but he lives in Thailand.
Mhm.
And he's like, anybody wants to come out to Thailand, I'll treat you like a king. You'll train out here. And so it's like just making those kind of connections, I think was just really cool for me. And gives me opportunities to travel and train, and learn different people and different things. And yeah, man, I just am grateful for all the people that we met. But yeah, everybody, there was a lot of contentious moments in the house, and there's some drama for sure that's going to unfold. But everybody had respect for each other, um, and I think we joke about it now. We're like, we're gonna do a reunion show in 30 years, and we'll all just be fat and probably have CTE,
That'd be
but it'll be
funny.
good.
Yeah, sure. Well, hopefully none of you guys have CTE. Listen, you said, and we're not going to keep you much longer. I know you said you had to train in like 20 minutes when we started. You said that you did respect Conor's coach, maybe not so much for Conor. Curious, did you respect Conor before the season started?
I fought on the same card as Connor. We used to actually have the same manager, Audi Attar, from Paradigm Sports
Right.
Management. So
Sure.
I had fought on the same card as him, UFC 170, when his first fight was Poirier, and so that was when the Irish essentially took over Las Vegas for the first time. Um, and that's when everybody started realizing that he was something different, like had a different type of following than the rest of us.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I mean, I respect him as a competitor. I respect his skills. I respect him as far as what he's accomplished in the sport. But I don't have a lot of respect for him as a man. And that's just, everybody's different. Each live your life. Each their own. But yeah, I'm just not a big Conor McGregor fan as a man, as how he conducts himself, how he lives his life. Just not the way I would live mine. And of course, it's easy to say from this side of the fence when I don't have $1 billion, but I like to think that the character I built over the last 35 years, I still wouldn't live that type of life. But again, each their own. But it's just not something that I personally, sign off on.
Hey, fair enough, man. We don't got to go too deep into that. I understand that. You look comfortable in there in the fight as far as the Mondo Gutierrez fight. Did you feel like things were going in there in your, did you feel like things were going your way for you? You look good in there. You look comfortable. Didn't look like you were in any like danger at any moment in time, right? So how did you feel when you were in there with him?
Yeah, I just knew I wanted to push the pace on him and keep him on his back foot, keep him moving backwards, apply
Yeah.
a lot of pressure, and defend his takedowns. We knew that his only real opportunity, or his likely opportunity to win the fight, would be on the ground, or his best opportunity. Um, and so I knew, like, just defend his takedowns, reverse him if he tries to push you into the cage, which I did pretty frequently, and kind of just rough him up and use your size when you're in those positions. You're at space, just stalk them and don't chase them. Kind of cut them off and try to use your length. And I felt like it was going pretty good. He landed some shots, but I was landing some clean shots too. I felt like sometimes when you're in there, you have a comfort level, right? Like, and I felt like I was the more comfortable fighter of the two. Like he was still in the fight for sure. It wasn't like super one sided, but I do feel like I was controlling the pace of things and kind of the direction of things, and then that knee landed. So always good to get out of there when you can, you know.
Always good to finish it early, right? And the reason I ask is because you did look comfortable in there. It looked like you were sort of in a good flow. We're gonna wrap this up. I want to ask a couple questions before we go. Chandler said something interesting. He said he thought that you fought better than even you thought you were gonna fight. Like, is that accurate? Do you feel like you went out there and put on a better performance than you even thought? And how much did Chandler have to do? How much did he have to do with that, getting you ready for that?
Yeah, for me it was like I was really, every fight's different. There's fights I've gone into where I've been almost too calm and collected and like, hey, I need to kind of amp myself up here. I'm about to fight and I'm just too relaxed. And there's other fights I've had where I'm like, why do I do this? I'm like walking to the cage, it's like, dude, this is the last time I'm doing this. I'm freaking nervous and like I got a pit in my stomach. And so every
Yeah.
fight's different. And for this fight, this first fight on the show especially, I just was nervous because everything for the last 8 years of trying to get back to the UFC culminated in this one moment, and I was either gonna make the most of it or I was gonna flop. And so I felt more nerves than normal, um, and I just had to learn how to like channel that and make sure I didn't let that affect me and affect my performance. And I think Coach Chandler, and the whole coaching staff really were a big part in helping me on the mental side of things. And I had a really tough weight cut. It was a brutal weight cut. My rehydration was rough. It was worse than usual. We got noticed to be on the show. We didn't get like a full training camp. So the weight cut was definitely a hard one for me. So, there was a lot of things, and Chandler kind of alludes to this, but there were a lot of signs that things weren't going well prior to the fight. But able to regroup from that and like come out and put on a good performance. I think at the end of the day, that's what matters. And so we were able to do that. I definitely think the coaches played a big part in that.
Hey, man, again, what you just said, that's all that matters. You got the W, you're moving on. And I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure the fans are looking forward to seeing what's next for you on this season. I know you got the kids there. You got the training coming up, man. We're going to leave you to that. But I do appreciate you joining us, man, recapping the last couple episodes. It does mean a lot to me and for the people that are interested in watching them.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on. Always good to talk MMA. And yeah, well, the show should be interesting how it unfolds. We'll see how it's interesting for us too, because we don't know how it's going to be edited. So we're learning each week
Right.
along with everybody else. I mean, obviously we know the results. We were there, but there's still things that get thrown in. You're like, huh, that's interesting how they put this and put that. And
Yeah.
so it's been we're right there with you guys. So I appreciate everybody watching and tuning in and reaching out for support, showing support. It's been 99.9% just supportive messages and things like that, which are always nice to get to know. You got people behind you and that are rooting for you, or especially the ones that talk about like connections they made to my story and how that affects them. I mean, that's beyond fighting, the X's and the O's and the wins, and all that. It's cool to make connections with people and
Right.
hopefully motivate somebody out there in the world to in their life. That's the whole point to me, at least.